I have had the Nikon ZR for just over a week. And the question I've been asked about this camera more than any other is how good is it? And I've tried to answer that question by comparing the codecs that come in this camera. We've examined all of the weird quirks that are in this camera right now, but today is the day we really answer that question. Because today we are pitting this Nikon ZR against a real RED camera. And not just any RED camera, we're pitting it against the RED weapon Monstro, a VistaVision monster that has shot movies like Queen's Gambit, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, All Quiet on the Western Front, Stranger Things, Army of the Dead, etc. Now, that camera and this camera are two completely different cameras. So really, when we talk about testing and comparing, we're just gonna be comparing image quality. Although, at the end of the video, I will be doing a slight and brief pros and cons of owning both. All right, buckle up, because the results are a little shocking. In this first test, I just set up a simple shot by the window and exposed for the outside. On this shot, no other light was used. I tried to get the frames exact, but it is difficult considering the size difference between these cameras. I mean, I even went to the lengths of measuring from the floor to the center of the sensor and from the chair to the sensor to try to get it exact, but at the end of the day, they aren't perfect. The tripod stand did get a little turned, and that's because my dog Hank ran into it. But it's about the only thing different in these two shots. The Voigtlander 28mm was used for both shots, and the settings were the same for white balance and ISO. Both were shot at 800 ISO. Now, I've labeled these as A and B because really, I didn't want to tell you which is which. I want you to guess what you think which is which. And at the end, I'll reveal it, and you can see how close you were. In this next shot, I still exposed for the outside, but this time brought in a huge key light to level the exposure on my face. In this shot, my 50mm Summilux was used. Now, unlike the codec video I made, I tried to match these images as close as possible on purpose. And as you can see, these are insanely close. But if I take my original field of view from both cameras, you'll be able to distinguish which is which. The Monstro, having the VistaVision sensor, offers a wider field of view, but also the Monstro is rendering the out of focus areas just slightly differently. It looks like it has a slightly shallower depth of field. For this next test, we're doing something similar but more extreme. My buddy Josh does this test, and I think it's a great way to look at the dynamic range of a high contrast scene. So for this test, I just sat in a chair next to a window and I exposed for the outside. And I did my best to get the exposures exact between the two cameras. And I haven't altered anything in post really. I've kept them pretty much identical using film convert nitrate. Just so you know, film convert nitrate is how I grade all of my footage in every video. It's just wild to me that a $2,200 camera can compete with something like a RED Monstro. All right, enough of this, let's get back to the tests. I was able to acquire the Mofosh Poco PL to Z adapter from my friend Johnny Romes, shout out Johnny Romes. And because of that, I took some anamorphic lenses to one of my favorite places, Antelope Island, to do some slow motion, high frame rate comparisons. In the Monstro, we shot 8K 60 frames a second because that's the maximum that it will do in its full format. And with the Nikon ZR, we did 6K 60 frames a second, but we also did 4K 120 in each of those cameras. I mean, that was pretty badass. Nice to find some bison and to get a few that were so close. But anyway, compression ratios were kind of all over the place, and the Monstro had a limitation where I had to shoot 12:1 at 6K 60 instead of 7:1 or something like that, but I was able to shoot 6:1
on 4K 120.
After Antelope Island, I came back here and set up this shot. This is my talking head, my A-cam. This is kind of how most of my videos are filmed. And so I wanted to see if the ZR could be a worthy replacement to my KX or the Monstro for this scene. Let me know what you think. In all of these tests, I'm basically putting the ZR in situations I would normally put my KX or my Monstro, because I really want to see, is it good enough to substitute at any time in any situation and make it believable. Remember, these tests are for my own personal gain. I'm doing this very selfishly to see how I want to move forward with my kit in 2026. The Nikon ZR is pretty interesting. Unlike a traditional RED camera, it does have native ISOs. Now I know the Gemini did this. It had a dual base ISO system. On the Nikon ZR, that is 800 and 6400. And pretty much what I've seen, if you preserve your highlights and underexpose a little and shoot an 800, the image quality is outstanding. It is an extremely clean image. But what happens when you shoot everything at 6400? And bring it down in post or leave it at 6400. How clean is the image then? Well, this morning I woke up bright and early, walked the dogs. It was super dark outside, so a perfect time to test that 6400 ISO. It's just before 7 o'clock. I'm taking the dogs out for a walk, and I thought I would try the high ISO setting, which is 6400, just to see how it does. It is not pitch black, but it is very dark. With 6400 and the lens at maximum aperture, which is 1.5, it's looking pretty good to me, but you never know until you take it home and see. I've got 3 additional clips here that I wanted to show you that I think illustrate the 6400 ISO point a little bit more. Just gives you a little more detail. We've got this first clip shot next to this church. Lens is wide open. Shot at 6400. Here you can kind of see the noise performance. Here's like the grain structure. And to me, that looks not just perfectly acceptable, but pretty darn good. I've heard from people that the noise at 6400 is terrible. Couldn't be further from the truth, but I do have an idea as to why they're getting the results they're getting, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But that's at 6400 ISO. I think it looks great. And also, fun fact, I don't have noise reduction on this. It's a raw clip. You're supposed to put noise reduction on it. I don't even think you would need it with this. Also, fun fact, I've never used noise reduction, period. I've never put noise reduction on any of my R3D clips. Nobody's complained ever about the noise in one of my videos. Next clip, also shot at 6400, but blown out to smithereens. Here you can kind of see the noise pattern a little bit more if I go. Yeah, it's there, but again, it's not bad, but the overall image is just smoked. It's white hot. But when I took this clip, I just made sure that I wasn't clipping. Even though it looks like it, on the waveform, I wasn't clipping. And if I come into my RED RAW settings, and I bring this down to, like, let's say 640, obviously it's much darker, but that was like a proper exposure right here. This is what it would have looked like. It's pretty accurate. And now there's no noise at all. It's totally clean. Colors look awesome. This last clip is probably the most extreme example. Let's see. So this white hot mess right here in the middle is my dog Henry. You can see his leash. This is Hank. They're very hard to expose at the same time because one is black and one is white. With Henry, you can't see anything. It's just gone. And this was shot at 800. However, if I take it down to, let's say, 80, which is a real extreme, if you look closely, all of that like color detail is back in Henry's fur. Some of the brown, some of the gray, even some of that bluish nuance that he has. But also, what's kind of crazy is if we look at Hank here, Hank, even though we dropped it all the way down, There's still lots of information there. He looks perfectly exposed. You can see all of the detail in his fur and Henry's. So at 800, this thing was like a white hot mess, but I didn't clip the footage. And because of that, afterwards, I could take it all the way down to 80, apply that. I would actually go a little brighter in reality, but they look amazing. So make sure you don't clip your shiz. We're gonna be talking about this more in detail in a second in the exposure section. While there's more to a camera than just its image quality, it's incredible that I can even approach the image quality of my RED Monstro with a tiny compact camera that costs just $2,200. So when people ask me, how good is it? When we're talking about image quality, it's absolutely incredible. But I do have to add a huge if asterisk to this. If you get the exposure correct, then the image is incredible. And I say that because exposing this camera is not nearly as simple as exposing my REDs. I did an extensive exposure test that basically broke my brain, and I'm not gonna cover it at length, but if you want to see all of that footage from the exposure test, plus all of the test footage throughout this video, and all of the codec comparison footage from that video, you can do so through the link to my Patreon down in the description below. It's all in there, and it'll probably save you a rental fee. But to sum it up, you kind of have to treat this camera as if it has just two ISOs, 800 and 6400. Every other number between those numbers is just metadata. So if you can, shoot everything at ISO 800, and if you have to go over at all, go all the way up to 6400. Now, something interesting that I found is it seems to me, again, early days, that if you shoot at a base ISO and decide to change the ISO in post, it does not affect noise performance. However, if you decide to use the waveforms to get your exposure, it's gonna probably drive you up a wall, because the waveforms, depending on what ISO you select, the clipping points are all over the place. I like to underexpose my footage at ISO 800. I actually use my exposure compensation to give it a negative 0.7, so almost a full stop. I'm finding best results from there. For 6400, I kind of actually push it a little bit higher. ETTR, as they say, exposed to the right. I take it all the way up to where it's clipping, and then I pull it back down till it's not clipping, and that's where I go from there. And again, this might change over some time, but I think this is a testament as to why Nikon needs to lean in to the RED tools like the stoplight system for getting exposure. You will never use anything easier or simpler to get a perfect exposure than RED's stoplight system. And then Nikon, if you're listening, As a failsafe, the perfect 1-2 combo, add false color. With stoplights and false color, you're gonna nail exposure every single time. This is my frustration with the Nikon ZR. It's reliability, but not in the traditional sense of the word. I'm not worried about the Nikon ZR not booting up or breaking. I'm worried about, in a pressure situation, I'm not going to be able to get a perfect exposure or perfectly nailed shot when it counts. What makes RED so great is, yes, the codec, but there's more than that. It's the simplicity and the reassurance you get when you shoot with it. The menu is so simple to understand and the tools help you nail the shot the first time. Recently, I just wrapped the biggest project of my life where I shot everything on REDs, and while the image from the ZR is good enough to be thrown in as the A camera, I wouldn't trust it right now to get the shot when I needed it the most. 失礼なニコン様お読みいただき申し訳ございません。日本語は私の母国語ではありません。ニコンさん、お願いです。ファンとして、そしてあなたが予想を超える成功を収めることを願う者として、このカメラがニコンにもたらした新規ユーザーと長年のニコンを支えてきた素晴らしいコミュニティのために、どうかレッドツールを活用してください。そうすることでユーザー体験が向上し、結果として現在の忠誠心よりもさらな強い支持を得られるでしょう。以下でしたら申し訳ありません。ただ、この件については非常に情熱的になっているのです。Beyond that, this camera is incredible. Its boot up time is unparalleled. It feels like a tank. The screen is and should be the new standard. The audio quality is a joy to work with, and its size will quite literally change the way I shoot moving forward. Thank you so much for watching this video and all of the other videos that I've done on the Nikon ZR. I am, at this point, going to take a much needed break and just go shoot with it and try to make something really cool. And ultimately, that's what I hope for you, whether it's on this camera or another camera. I mean, that's what this is all about anyway. It's just getting out there and making cool stuff. Anyway, thanks again for watching. If you have any questions at all, please let me know down in the comments below. I'm pretty good about answering each and every one of them. Just for fun reference, basically everything except for the opening scene has been shot on the ZR. So all of this talking head like this, all on the ZR. Thanks again. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.